Anyone who's got a basic knowledge of the history of science fiction might know that humanoid robots are a common theme of it. From the 70s children's TV series Robert's Robots to the Channel 4 series Humans, which began in 2015, attempts have constantly been made to portray robots as being as close to the human race as possible, as though we're actually clever enough to produce another race of beings which are almost identical to our own. In the more recent series, Humans, the latest must-have gadget in a different version of our world in some parallel universe is a synth, which is a robot so lifelike it is almost indistinguishable from one of us. As these robots are, of course, computerized, they'll normally only perform the functions they've been programmed to perform, except when they're malfunctioning. However, someone has been doctoring these synths. They've written this special program which can transform them into conscious beings who are capable of thinking for themselves and having feelings which are similar to those experienced by a human being. To all intents and purposes, in fact, they are human beings, the only difference being that they're not literally flesh and blood, the same as we are. They're all made up of circuitry instead. To be precise, they're a different kind of human, a separate species if you like. They're literally another species which have been created by humans. Because they're electronic, they couldn't possibly exist without having been created. If such a race existed in reality, no one but would dispute that they were created. Yet so many people have difficulty accepting that we were created for the simple reason that we're all made up of flesh, blood and bone, rather than electronic circuitry. No one created the human race, or so they say. We could only have come about by means of natural selection. That's how we're all here. They've never seen God, the being who's supposed to have made us, so they just assume he's merely a character in fiction who's never existed in reality. But when you come to think of it, does this line of reasoning even begin to make any sense? We are physical beings made up of flesh and blood, it's true, but our very thoughts are believed to be electrical impulses in the brain. So in effect, we're like a sort of computer. Really, when you come to think of it, the human race has all sorts of big ideas regarding what it might be able to achieve in the future, such as being able to eradicate disease, maybe even death in fact, and as I've mentioned earlier, creating a race of superhumans by using electronic circuitry. They can believe humans will be able to achieve all this, but when it comes to putting their trust in God, they can't do that for the simple reason that they can't yet accept he exists. I remember someone telling me once that they couldn't accept the Bible because it taught that Jesus was born of a virgin, and that was impossible. It's ironic, in my opinion, that someone can't believe in a woman being artificially inseminated by God when humans can do the very same thing. It just shows that they have a lack of faith. If you don't want to accept something, you won't. It's as simple as that. When you come to think of it, the human body is like a highly sophisticated machine, with every part performing a specific function. Imagine someone stood there looking at a tree. They use their eyes to look at it, and then they use their brain to suddenly decide to pick one of the apples off it and eat it. They then use their feet to carry their legs, so that they can walk over to this tree, and then they use their arm to move their hand over to the apple, so that they can use their fingers to pick it up with. They then use their teeth to chew the apple with, so as it can be broken down into parts which are small enough to enter into their throat without them choking to death. From their throat, the chewed parts of the apple are able to enter the various parts of their digestive system to be converted into nutrients or waste. You can see how all those body parts work together in harmony to keep the body alive. I remember the Barbary word in my old village where I used to live, being an atheist years ago, and I asked him, if there's no God, why does every organ in your body serve a purpose? His reply was that this wasn't the case. It wasn't true. I suppose a lot of people must realise why he made this statement, as we humans do have an organ in our bodies that doesn't seem to perform any specific function. This organ is called the appendix, and I'm sure most of us will have heard of it. Until recently, the appendix was considered in medical circles to be an evolutionary throwback passed on to us from the animals we descended from. This was due to the absence of side effects noticed following its removal. In more recent years, however, attitudes toward the appendix have changed. William Parker, Randy Bollinger, and colleagues at Duke University proposed in 2007 that the appendix serves as a haven for useful bacteria when illness flushes it from the rest of the intestines. This was based on an understanding that had emerged by the early 2000s about the immune system supports the growth of beneficial intestinal bacteria in combination with many well-known features of the appendix. Research performed at Winthrop University Hospital showed that individuals without an appendix were 4 times as likely to have a recurrence of Clostridium difficile colitis. The appendix, therefore, may act as a safe house for beneficial bacteria. This reservoir of bacteria could then serve to repopulate the gut flora in the digestive system following a bout of dysentery or cholera or to boost it following a milder gastrointestinal illnesses. So it is plain to see, isn't it, that the notion that not every organ of your body is there to perform a specific function has in recent years been proven false. Actually, not many people will realise this, but the rising tide of atheism and agnosticism, which have both become prevalent in our modern age, are not really the results of greater scientific knowledge or advancement, as some would have us believe. In fact, the more knowledge we gain about the human biology and science, the greater the evidence that there is a creator. As I showed in part 2 of this discussion, scientists are still no closer nowadays to providing an explanation for how the first living cell managed to form itself without having been designed. And in the first part of it, I showed that cosmologists have so far come up with no logical explanation of what was the cause of the Big Bang. Without a belief in a God who would kick-start such events, there simply is no other rational explanation, no matter how hard one might rack their brains to find one. Trying to do so will simply never work. There is no logical explanation for how this video got posted on YouTube, apart from saying I did it, or my twin brother did it, which is false because I was an only child. The reason why belief in God has become unfashionable in our modern age is simply because it was prophesied in Scripture that this would happen. You may have heard in certain religionists who teach that we are living in the last days or the end times of this system of things, in which we are ruled over by worldly governments. Jesus and his apostles prophesied in the Bible about what conditions in the end times or the last days will be like, to help us recognise that we are living during this particular time period. In the 24th book of Matthew, Jesus prophesied that nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another. He later goes on to say that because of the increasing of lawlessness, the love of the greater number will grow cold. You can see that all this is coming true nowadays. You've more than likely heard someone say, how can there be a God? If there was, he wouldn't let this and that happen. But it was prophesied biblically that they'd have such an attitude. Thus, the rising tide of atheism and agnosticism is all part of Bible prophecy coming true. In Luke chapter 21 verse 10, more details of Jesus' prophecies are disclosed. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes and in one place after another food shortages and pestilences, and there will be fearful sights and from heaven great signs. You can certainly say that there's been a great deal of pestilences around during the past 100 years or so, can't you? After the First World War, there was the Spanish flu epidemic, which persisted into the 1920s. If you watch the news a lot, there's a chance you might even be scared to watch this video clip, because I'm not wearing a face mask, even though it's impossible to catch anything through using social media. There were more killed in wars during the last century than in all the previous wars throughout recorded history, and there was hardly any length of time when there was a war breaking out somewhere in the world. You might argue that in more recent years, the earth has started to become more peaceful, but if you look into the scriptures, you can see that even that is part of scriptural prophecies being fulfilled. In 1 Thessalonians 5:1-3, we are told, "Now, as for the times and seasons, brothers, you need nothing to be written to you, for you yourselves know very well that Jehovah's day is coming exactly as a thief in the night. But whenever it is that they are saying peace and security, then sudden destruction is to be instantly on them, just like birth pains on a pregnant woman, and they'll by no means escape." The Apostle Paul foretold the conditions prevalent in our modern society in 2 Timothy chapter 3, where he prophesied that men will be lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God, and having an appearance of godliness, but proving false to its power. They can't love God for the simple reason that they don't believe he exists. And this is far more common nowadays than what it's ever been. The evolutionist Charles Darwin was an agnostic. He wasn't sure whether any sort of God existed or not, but his work made it easy to be an atheist. The evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins has acknowledged that prior to Darwin's teachings becoming popular, it was a lot harder to be an atheist, because without his teachings of evolution, it was more difficult to explain how everything had come into existence, but without a God creating it. But, as I pointed out earlier, the theory of evolution has never managed to explain this very thing, which it has always attempted to explain, and as our scientific knowledge increases, it becomes even more difficult to explain the existence of everything in the world without admitting it was deliberately created. In the 19th century, when Darwin's theory first became popular, we didn't realise just how complex a single living cell was. Really, only ignorance leads to atheism. Anyway, I hope you enjoy watching this. If you have anything to say about it, please comment and let me know what your thoughts are on the subject. Anyway, bye for now. I'll be back as soon as possible with more discussions on various topics.